Hey equals, it's Kim, and today is the day we get to talk about the breadth, the depth, the wondrousness of creation, and you can spell that with a capital C or a small c, doesn't matter to me, and because I think it all works the same. So, what do we need to start with? First of all, I want to talk about what the word binary means, make sure we're all on the same page. So binaries are like opposites. So white and black could be binaries. They're opposites. All color, no color. Right? But if we think of the world in terms of the binaries, the black and the white, we miss the wondrousness that is gray. All right, enough of my t-shirts. So we even use in phrasing words or phrases like, that's a gray area. And it's this thing where we think we don't understand it. All right? We think we understand black and white, the binaries, but for some reason the space in between is that thing. Oh, that's the gray area. All right? And I want to talk about the whole thing, the binaries as well as what's in the middle. And it may always be something you don't quite understand, but the joy of the world is you don't have to. And especially when you're talking about people's identity, you don't need to necessarily understand. It's probably a good idea to have some idea what a person means if they tell you they're transgender or they're cisgender, or they tell you that they're gender non-conforming or gender non-binary or gender queer, any of those words. It's always good to kind of know what they mean, but you don't actually have to understand. It's not your experience, it's theirs. What you need to remember is they're human, and that we should treat all humans with dignity and respect, and I would hope with kindness and compassion. We have this binary world, or we think we have this binary world, and that's so people who insist that you are either a man or a woman think in terms of the binary. And have difficulty with that gray area, or don't want a gray area. They don't want to work that hard in their heads to think about it, perhaps. Right? I challenge you to work a little bit harder to make sure that you do, to open up your thinking past those binaries. I have today these fancy little dice, and my marker is a little bit too large for these. It's also magnetic, so I can stick magnet words on it. I'm excited to play with these, right? But I've written on here, so the green dice is like gender identity, and I have things like cisgender, transgender, non-binary, gender fluid, gender non-conforming, gender queer written on the sides of the dice. And I have a blue dice. This is my gender expression dice. And so we have masculine and feminine, and trans feminine and trans masculine and androgynous, and there's probably others, but we're just playing today. And if you're this is my sexual orientation dice, so heterosexual, asexual, gay, pansexual, lesbian, bisexual, heterosexual, asexual. Yeah, I think I read them all. So you kind of get the idea. And then because I had 4 dice, I made a monogamy dice too, which I believe to be the case, because often when we're talking about people's sexual orientation, and when we start talking about sexual orientation, we often are talking about people's relationship status. And so I have a theory that just like sexual orientation and gender expression and gender identity all occur on a spectrum with binaries on either end, the black and the white on either end, and then all the gray in the middle. That the same is for people who are, monogamy and non-monogamy. So those are kind of monogamy, non-monogamy, being binaries. You assign whatever word you want to non-monogamous. That's up to you. I'm just going to use that term. And so serial monogamy is where you're with one person for a period of time, but you can't stay with them long term. So you date one person or married to one person for a while, and then the person needs to move on and find somebody new for a while, and then they're monogamous for a while. They call that a serial monogamous. I have 4 dice, and we're going to just take a little bit of time today. We're going to create, love creating, and we're going to create people. But first, let's think about how that spectrum exists for humanity. So, is everybody's hair blonde or black? Nope. There's all this variation. Is everybody 5'4"? Nope. They are all varieties of height. Does everybody's brain work the same and everybody thinks the same? No. The wonderful thing about humanity is we all think differently. Even our opponents who think in terms of an X chromosome and a Y chromosome, and you either have two X chromosomes or you have an X and a Y chromosome, haven't caught up in the science. If you're here in Columbus, go talk to the people at the Thrive Clinic at Nationwide Children's Hospital. Same thing would be at any children's hospital. Likely you could go in and ask to talk to somebody about situations where somebody is born without just an XX or an XY, where there's some other combination or just a single chromosome. It happens. Look it up. That's what Google's for. So even that argument falls apart. Up here, I am going to put the answers to the rolling the dice, because it's a little bit hard for me to roll dice where you can see it. So I'm going to roll it on the table down here, and you'll just have to, I'll try to show you what comes up. So 3 people. Here's our first person. So part of the point of this is that your sexual orientation does not predict your gender identity. Your gender identity does not predict your gender expression. Your sexual orientation does not predict your gender expression. Your gender expression doesn't predict your gender identity or your sexual orientation, or whether you're monogamous or non-monogamous. So let's demonstrate it with our dice. All right, person number 1, and first person, sexual orientation. This person is born gay, and their gender expression as they grow up is masculine, and their gender identity is non-conforming. So they're gay, masculine, non-conforming person, and they are highly monogamous. All right, so our gay, masculine, non-conforming, gender non-conforming person who is very monogamous. Likely the gay in this particular case would be referring to a woman, because I often identify myself as gay. So let's say that this was a person who was assigned female at birth, and they are gay. They are masculine in their gender expression. They identify as gender nonconforming, so they don't necessarily identify as a man or a woman. They identify as gray. And they're very monogamous, so they're likely to have had only one partner in life unless something took that partner from them. That's person number 1. We will call that person Chris. Okay, so that's our person Chris. All right, second person, rolling the dice again. So this second person who is not monogamous, again, assign your own word to that you want. Their sexual orientation is asexual. Gender expression is feminine, and their gender identity is genderqueer. So we have a person whose gender expression, who presents feminine, probably wears makeup, has maybe longer hair, earrings, may wear feminine clothes, identifies as genderqueer, so it doesn't identify as male or female, identifies as genderqueer. They're asexual, which means they aren't particularly attracted to anyone, so they may or may not engage in sexual activity, and they are not monogamous. Now, you can be in relationships that don't involve sexual activity, but they're not monogamous, so they date a lot of people, or maybe they don't date anyone at all. So we're going to call this particular person Pat. So we have Pat and Chris. All right, and so one more person that we will create here. So we're going to roll the dice for their gender identity. And they are transgender. So this person is transgender. Their gender expression is, again, feminine. Their sexual orientation is pansexual. And their monogamy status is they're a monogamous person. All right, so this, from what I have here, I don't know what this person's gender assigned at birth might have been. So for the sake of variety, let's say it was male. They identify as transgender. That would mean that currently they identify as a woman. Their gender expression is very female. So they are wearing female makeup, female hairstyles, female clothing. They would probably identify as a trans woman. They are attracted to people across the spectrum. So they may be attracted to men, they may be attracted to women, they may be attracted to gender non-binary people, gender non-conforming people, other trans people. Their attraction is, they would probably say that their attraction is to people, not to just a man or a woman, but to the full variety of the people are. And this person is particularly monogamous, so they probably don't have a whole lot of relationships in their life. So those are our three people, created by rolling dice, which is my approximation of creation. That's a lot of shuns. The point is that just because somebody is transgender doesn't... Okay, so what's the point? When I was growing up, and I grew up in a fairly liberal progressive family, and I don't know that we talked about sexual orientation or we talked about gender identity, but certainly my impression as I was growing up is that somebody who was transgender, and I only knew about trans women, I didn't know about trans men when I was young, but certainly, that I understood that there was such people who are transgender. I knew that there were people who were transgender. But my thought process was that these were gay men who wanted to be with other men and thought that society would accept them better if they were women. And that way they could be with men and be perceived as heterosexual. And so I had it all messed up. I get that, but probably that's the way a lot of us were growing up. Our understanding evolved over time. The point being that your gender identity does not predict your sexual orientation. Your sexual orientation does not predict your gender identity or your gender expression or your monogamy level. It's all kind of like rolling dice. We've used a lot of terms today. Do you need to understand them? Have somewhat of an idea probably out in the world. If you're an academic, maybe you need to have a better understanding. If you're an author or something and go write about it, then you can get a better understanding. But I often have people who I do trainings with, who are going to be engaging with LGBT people, and they're like, okay, if this person their birth certificate says they're a man and they're dressing like a woman and they date a lot of people, does that mean that they are transgender, pansexuals? And I always tell them, relax. The beauty is you don't have to know. All you need to do is treat that person as a person, and they may, if you're lucky, tell you how they identify. And that's the important thing. You don't need to be trying to figure out, what their identity is or what their sexual orientation is. They know. If they want you to know, they'll tell you. And otherwise, you just treat them as a person, because people deserve to be treated with dignity, respect, kindness, and compassion. Help me make America compassionate again, everybody. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up. Hit the red subscribe button to be notified when I put up new videos. I usually put up 2 a week. This week I only made it to 1. Love to see you again. Have a great time, equals. Bye.